Welcome to the Business Heroes Podcast. Power up your business and change the world.
Hello and welcome to the Business Heroes Podcast. I am Jared Elrod of BizDevHeroes.com, and you are listening to the greatest podcast I have ever done. You thought I was going to say ever, right? You're like, oh, he's being arrogant. This isn't my first podcast, but it is the best one I've ever done, so I can say that. Right, today we are talking about, in this fabulous episode 5, we are talking about mental barriers that hold you back. So, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, business people, direct sales representatives, salesmen, whatever, we have a lot of things to overcome, obviously. It's not the best economy, which, could be a bonus, but in general, we got a bad economy. There's a lot of competition. It's not like we figured this whole online business and marketing stuff out right in the beginning of the internet and could just really get into the beginning of that. There's all kinds of things. Competitors, people just wanting to sue for no reason just to make some money because, whatever. You can find all these obstacles. But the number one obstacle, in my opinion, to starting, creating, and growing a successful business, specifically an online business, but really any business, is mental barriers. Now, if you're starting like a restaurant or something like that, maybe capital, because to me that just seems so daunting. And I know I keep making comments about this. Like, I have a lot of respect for people who can create a brick and mortar business in this day and age, especially like a restaurant that takes so much planning. I mean, you literally have to be like living in the now and living in the next 5 years. But anyways, on average, the average person, the biggest barrier are mental barriers. These things that we keep telling ourselves, I've been referring to it the last, few weeks as just head trash, the things that we allow to live in our mind that convince us of, negative things, hold us back, keep us from taking actions, keep us from being as fulfilled and doing as much as we could. So I want to go through some of these. Now, some of them may just be, some of them are just natural from starting a business and feeling, you're new and you've never done it before. Some of them are going to be things you're going to have adopted from your family. Like, you're going to have, just mindsets you picked up and learned from being part of your family, because that's the way your family thinks. So I'm going to cover that. And then some of them are just kind of like our mind's natural way of, unless you're like super, super into yourself, just like our mind's natural way of convincing us to be scared, basically. So we're gonna dive into some of these. So number one is you're not ready, or I'm not ready. And that's something that, this isn't just for new people. This isn't like I'm not ready to start a business. This is something that like entrepreneurs struggle with. I mean, even entrepreneurs who are very successful and are launching a new product will still struggle with this. Is like, oh, I'm not ready. I just need to work on this some more. Or when I get to this level. But most likely, let's just say you are starting out. Like, I know that this was a big one for me. And the only way I could overcome it was literally to throw myself into an impossible situation that I had to overcome. So the first thing I did is I quit my job and I got into sales, because I knew that just tinkering around as an entrepreneur wasn't getting me anywhere. And I needed fast, accelerated growth. So I quit my job and took a job as a salesperson. Again, this is covered in, episode 1. If you haven't heard it, you can go back and hear my story, half my story. I'm going to get around to the other half one of these days. So that's what I had to do. And then after I did that for a year, I said I was going to do it for a year, at almost exactly a year, just to be honest with you, I didn't have the courage to quit. And I wanted to for about a month. And I was like, what am I going to do? I got to get off this train. I said I would. And I got fired. And I was grateful because they made the decision for me. Because I don't know if I would have had the courage to quit anytime soon. I may have still been doing it. But I did have the courage to then not go like my boss was. I didn't get fired by my boss. I got fired by my boss's boss because I made him mad about something stupid. And so my boss was very apologetic. My boss told me, hey, you know what? This breaks policy, so don't tell anyone, but I can get you a job at, basically, he's like, I overheard that you were talking about going to one of these other stores. Because me and a buddy, when it was late at night, we talked. And I kept talking about one of the dealerships down the road who had they got off an hour earlier than us and they opened an hour later. So I kept talking to him about, oh man, how nice would that be? We should go down there and work. So he overheard me, talking around with my buddy about that. He's like, hey, I overheard you were talking about, he's like, if you go down there and apply, have the manager call me so I can give you a recommendation and get you right in. But don't tell anyone because it's against policy. Obviously, that was pretty tempting. You get fired and it would have been really easy to have driven down the road, gotten that job, and then gone home and said, okay, babe, bad news and good news. Okay, so the bad news is the job that I hate and keeps me away from the family all the time and that we all hate, but, I'm doing it to learn. And, right now we're depending on it. I got fired, but the good news is I got another job at this other car lot. And I don't have to work as the hours are more family friendly because the owner is more family friendly. So I get to come home for dinner instead of after the kids are in bed. Right? That would have been a great story. She would have been for 30 seconds freaking out that I got fired. And then she'd been like, oh, wow, this is more like a promotion. But I knew if I did that, I knew that's not what I needed. I said I was going to do this for a year and I had to move forward because I know for me, I don't feel like I never knew. Let me start over. I knew I was going to never feel ready and I had to throw myself in. Just like I threw myself into sales, I had to throw myself back into entrepreneurship or I was never going to do it. So I did. And I really think that you have to overcome that concept of not ready, because one thing I've learned is, though it's true you may not be ready, a lot of times you're not going to be ready until you're partially already on your journey. And something I found both in business but then even in ministry, so as I'd go from, I had a couple different youth pastor positions, I always felt like when I was starting a couple months into my current position, I always felt like I was 100% qualified for my last position. So I would get a job and about 3 months into it, I would start to the honeymoon wore off and I'd realize, wow, this job is really out of my league. The organizational skills or the level of preaching or the level of whatever, I really have to rise up. I'm treading water here, barely. Man, I really feel like I'm ready to go back to my last position that, I was there for almost 2 years. I now feel ready for that job, to start that job. And I noticed that trend, and I think that it's so true, because a lot of times when you start a journey, so we don't start a journey, let me say it this way, we don't start a journey because we don't feel like we're ready. But a lot of times I don't feel like you're actually ready. You can't ever be ready until you actually start the journey, because you're not going to know what you need. Obviously that's a horrible way to do a real life physical journey. You don't want to just get on the road, or you don't want to just start hiking and then go, okay, well then I'll figure out what I need. Oh, okay, I'm halfway up Half Dome. I probably should have some water and, probably have, some trail mix. Not a good idea. But in terms of this, other stuff, you just have to start. You've got to do it. I could sit here all day and tell stories of my life about how I knew I had to do something. I didn't feel ready. I finally got over myself after wasting months and months, if not years. I would do it, and then you just figure it out, and you can fix it later. So, maybe you start your website and you create your sales funnel and it's horrible, and 6 months into it, you redo it because you now know what to do. Or maybe you start your website and you don't even know what a sales funnel is, and you didn't even have one. I didn't have email capture for the longest time. That's not true. I had just a widget on the side of my website, and I knew that because I didn't start my site for so long because this is before the Sumo Me pop-ups and all that kind of stuff, and I postponed for months starting my website because I couldn't figure out which plugin to use to do that. And I finally found one, but it worked with Aweber and not MailChimp, and I was so frustrated, and I finally just said, you know what, forget it. And I just started my website and just used that little widget to enter in your email address. It didn't work very well at all, but then I built my website, and then guess what? Sumo Me came around. Now I use Sumo Me, and it's amazing. And it gets better like literally every 2 weeks. There's like a new feature or something improved on it. So you've got to start. You got to get going, otherwise, because you're never going to be ready. Don't let that hold you back. Number 2, the mental barriers is you're not good enough. So you know what, people. Here's the thing. So with this whole not good enough, what you're basically saying is, I can do this, I enjoy this, I should start a business on this. And then you get scared and you get that mental doubt of, okay, well, let's just use social media for an example. Social media marketing, since that was my first attempt at freelancing. Okay, I know how to use Facebook. I know how to use, a lot of the different social networks. I did it for years as a youth pastor, and I used it to gather a crowd of students. I used it to basically for marketing purposes for students. I should start up doing social media marketing consulting. And then you start to have that doubt. Well, yeah, but who am I? So I've used it for 4 or 5 years, and so I did all the tasks of exactly what they're wanting help with. But who am I? I'm not Neil Patel. Why he's or Noah Kagan or any of these guys who are amazing at this stuff. And then you get these doubts. Here's the thing. First off, they didn't start out that way. They had to grow. Second off, and go back to episode, I think it was 2, maybe 3, where I'm answering Sarah's question. And I'm talking about how Noah Kagan's journey with AppSumo, about how AppSumo didn't start off as this, app and plug-in producing company. They started off super simple. So go back and listen to that episode if you want to hear more about that. But the whole idea of not being good enough, it's a fallacy, because here's the thing. First off, you're right. There are people out there who are much smarter and more experienced, and you have no business training and teaching them. But guess what? The opposite holds true. There's people you know more than, right? So look at this way. Let's say you know nothing about Facebook marketing, but for some reason you want to do Facebook marketing. You know nothing. You don't even have a Facebook account. So you buy a course on how to Facebook marketing for beginners or XYZ or whatever. I think there's one actually called Zero to Facebook Marketing, which is pretty good from what I've heard. Let's say you go out, you buy that course, you follow along, you create your account, you follow along with all the training. Let's say it's 12 hours of training, this fictional Facebook marketing course. You get done with those 12 hours of training, you set up your page, you run a little ad for your consulting services. Guess what? You now know more about Facebook marketing than hundreds and thousands of other people, right? So there's tons of people out there who know nothing, and you are completely qualified now after a weekend of training to help them with. Now, no, that doesn't mean you're going to be charging $5,000 an hour for consulting fees, but that's a place to start, right? You can start off doing that. A great story, Nick Unsworth from Life on Fire, he started, actually that's how he started. That's where I got that idea from. He bought this Facebook marketing training, and I don't know, go check out his stuff at lifeonfire.tv for all the details. But I heard him in one of his podcasts talking about how he came home and he told his girlfriend that he was going to start a Facebook marketing agency or something like that. And she's like, you don't even have a Facebook account. And he's like, well, yeah, but I just spent thousands of dollars on all this Facebook training. I got to do something with it. So he started an agency when he didn't even have an account. He had to go create one and learn this stuff. And then he ended up growing that business and ended up selling that business. And then now has a new business where he's primarily growing his business, from what he said, through Facebook ads, because he knows how to do it now. And look where he is. He's helping tons of other people. And that's the whole idea behind the Business Hero podcast, is becoming successful so then you can go out there and change the world and help other people. He became successful, went out and helped other people. So if you're ever feeling this, this head trash or this mental negative stuff of not being ready, not being good enough, here's a way to take it off of yourself and think about go with the whole Business Heroes mentality and motto here. There's people out there who need your help. So by not doing it, because by giving into your fear, you're cheating those people. That's like Superman. He got beat down by Lex Luthor because Lex Luthor had a kryptonite ring. And now Lex Luthor has the city taken hostage, and Superman's afraid and not going to go out there and save Metropolis because Lex Luthor had this ring. No, he's going to go figure it out. He's going to do it, right? Because he's Superman. Why? Because he's a hero. There's something bigger than himself. So that's this whole idea. Is like, if you get over these mental barriers, you become successful. Let's just put a number out there. Let's say you start making $100,000 a year on your business. Let's say you start making $500,000 a year. Whatever your number is, $1 million a year. Whatever your number that makes sense to you. If I say $1 million and you're like, oh my goodness, I would just like to pay my rent, lower it. Figure out, maybe $75,000 seems like so much money that you couldn't imagine making that. Maybe it is $1 million. Maybe it's $20 million. Whatever your number is, picture yourself making that through your business, loving what you're doing. Now think about more than just you, your responsibility to others. How could you help your family, like your immediate family? So if you're a guy listening, like how could you be providing for your family with that money? And I don't care if you're single, like if you're planning on having a family, like, whatever, like start saving up. You can start saving up college, tuition. Like how could you provide for your immediate family, your parents, your brothers and sisters, if you have any, your friends, and then you get into like your community. Like if you're making an abundance, you could create a scholarship to help out students. If you're a sports guy or girl, you can do a sports scholarship for a sports camp. If you're in, most school counties have, at least here on the West Coast, I used to work in the educational system. I was doing video stuff, but I used to work for the County Office of Education, and I worked in the ROP program. Like there's so many opportunities. You can do a scholarship to buy a graphic design student some books, or donate some money to the video or whatever, the medical lab, whatever your thing is. Like you could do a scholarship. You can get involved with a local community program, whether it be financially or even your time, because you're a well-known or at least well-respected successful business person. You can give your time back. You get so many things you can do that it's almost like it's irresponsible in that sense. Where I'm going with this take, because a lot of times we get so scared and we feel like, who am I? But flip it. No, who exactly? It's like, who are you? Who are you to deprive those people that you were put on this earth to help just because it was uncomfortable and scary and involved some risk, right? Find your calling. Now, obviously, if you're like a teacher and you're listening to this, I'm not saying you should be a business person. I'm assuming you're a business person listening to this, and you've identified that your calling in life is to be a business person, whether it be, you have an online business to help teach people how to ride horses better. I've heard about a lady with that business not too long ago, or you're selling, online marketing stuff. Whatever it is, think of your responsibility. Don't think of, okay, I gave that Superman example. Let's talk about Batman, right? Batman's freaking awesome. Like, Batman doesn't care who you are. If you're bad, he's gonna fight you. Like, there is an animated movie of Batman fist fighting Darkseid. And if you know anything about comics, like Darkseid is a new god from Genesis. So he's brought Superman down to his knees a few times. Like, this guy is like crazy powerful. Batman has nothing. And Batman was like fist fighting this guy because it was the right thing to do, right? He doesn't think of himself. He thinks of what he has to do. So that's one powerful way that will work, hopefully for you, if your mind is wired that way, is your responsibility to others. That's really quick. That was kind of a side tangent, so hopefully that made sense and is out there. I know that there's at least one person listening to this that's speaking to, and that was 4. So you're welcome. Let's move on. Number 3, and this is going to be our last one. We'll wrap up with this one, is being successful online doesn't work for regular people. Let's see if I can word this another way. The whole concept, I'll just tell my story. So I was raised, I had a great upbringing, a great family, but I had a very traditional family. And then my dad's, I like to joke that my dad was raised in the 50s and the 60s. Meaning that, like, even though he was born in and he was, from the 60s, like, I've seen his home videos, I've seen his, like, home pictures. he was raised like it was still the 50s. It's funny. His family was very traditional. And, my grandfather on that side of my dad's side was a metal worker. We call him, as a kids, we call him Blue Papa because he had blue overalls because, he did metal working on buildings all day. I don't know exactly what he did because I was very young when he retired. But I know now that he was a metal worker. He's a union guy. I don't know for sure he's in a union, but he's that stereotype, right? Of the guy from the, 50s. He works hard. He takes his lunch pail and his lunch into work every day. He pays his union dues. He shows up to work on time, works hard, goes home, spends time with his family. And that's what you do as a man is you provide, you work hard. He probably didn't care that much. He probably wasn't that passionate about metalworking, especially since I think a lot of what he did was like bending and shaping metal. And it wasn't like he was an artist, right? Like he made air ducts for air conditioning. I could be wrong, but I don't think that he was inspired. I don't think that was a passion, right? He was providing for his family. That was that mindset. Jump to my mom's side, which I had even more exposure to, my mom's side, because we lived closer to. And my grandpa, actually, there was a bit of an entrepreneurial side there. He had several, he did truck driving for a while. They did some different businesses. And then for a while, he was a painter where he was just, an independent contractor. And he would paint houses. And, my grandpa, business guy. And then he got a job because it was safe and secure. He got a job, ran for constable, which doesn't even exist in the county anymore. It was this weird position, but it's basically like a sheriff, kind of sheriff deputy. I don't know. He eventually became a marshal. They phased it out. But anyways, he became a constable, and it had benefits, it had retirement, it had all the safe things. And by no means am I criticizing his decision. It worked out very well for him. So very good retirement because of, that. And they're living very well, and they're able to help out people. We've got cousins that they're able to fund their starting their business. But what I'm saying is, that was my exposure on that side. So, and then my dad even had a business, a successful business. And then he had, hopefully he's not listening, and I remember him having a business as a kid, and I remember him not having a business and going into the academy to become CHP, which, if you're not from California, is California Highway Patrol. And he, so my example is I've got one grandpa who's, like I said, that union man. I've got another grandpa and a father who had businesses, but then things got kind of hard, and they went into safe, secure jobs. And then I just remember hearing stuff. So that was obviously an example that was set for me that you gotta do the safe and secure thing. And then I know just little things I don't know, just hearing and picking up on things that my dad would say and mindsets. I developed this mindset that if it's easy and if it's gonna give you any kind of great results, then it's probably a scam, right? You've got to just work your way up. And I don't even know if he ever actually said this or if it would just be, I can't think of a time. I literally think it was just perception, things I would pick up and infer because I would tell him about something and then his response to it. So I developed this attitude of I think it came down from that whole, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. But then raising the bar or lowering the bar so much of what's actually possible, what's too good to be true. So I remember when I was, I think it was right out of high school, I started my first business. I did some stuff. I always was trying to start businesses. I did stuff in high school, sold candy for, and all that kind of stuff. But I remember I had a business, and I was still living at home. And I started up a video production business because I wanted to be a filmmaker. I had all this camera equipment and everything. And so I started doing weddings, right? Not because I wanted to, but because it was a way to get paid. And I figured, well, I'd rather get paid to do something I don't really enjoy in the world I enjoy. I don't enjoy doing a wedding, but at least it's video stuff and I'm still learning and growing in my craft versus working at McDonald's and getting paid less and doing something that isn't really helping me progress at all. So I remember fast forward this a couple years to where I would have a part-time job. I was working part-time at the church for just a couple $100 a month. I'd have a part-time job that would be making me, a few $100, $600 at the most a month. And I had my business. So It was when my wife and I were dating and then engaged and then even first married. And I remember back when we were dating and I was working at a bookstore part-time, like I said, working at the church part-time, and then barely enough to get by, just enough to pay my basic bills. I'm wanting to get married and get engaged at this time, but I'm trying to figure out, how to even have money. And so with my business, I would get a client all off of referrals. I'd get a client and then it'd be amazing. Back then I was doing weddings at like $700 a pop. And then so to me it was crazy that I'd get someone to sign up and I'd get $700. I'd get half of it when they signed up, and then like a month or two later I'd get like the other half when I finished. And it was like Christmas every time I got a client, right? And so if I'd get a couple of clients and it was like I was rolling in the dough back then, but then I'd go for months without a client. And then it was like, man, things were getting hard. It's like, how do I get more clients? So I got into internet marketing. I started learning, well, not just internet, like direct response marketing. I got involved early on, as from my understanding, with the internet marketing stuff. Yankee Silva, I believe, Silver, and then some of these other guys, and they had this marketing program. And I remember making the decision, this is building my mindset here, and then this hopefully is going to come around to make a point here. I remember I have several vivid memories of being at the bookstore, closing up, vacuuming, straightening books and stuff, and thinking about their stuff. And I remember I got on their free newsletter, so I was getting their marketing stuff, and they're talking about like how they were making, like thousands of dollars a month, doing video stuff, and a lot of stuff they're doing was way easier than the wedding stuff I was doing, and they were making so much more. And they kept talking about like raising your prices, and they kept talking about like, if you're only charging $50 an hour for your video stuff, you're undervaluing yourself. And I'm like, holy crap, $50 an hour. Like, I can't even conceive getting to charging $50 an hour for my video production. I don't even do hourly. Like, it would be too expensive. Even at just like $10 an hour, the amount of time I put in these, I'm charging a flat rate of $700. Because even at $10 an hour, I'd be charging like $1,200. I just couldn't grasp it. Like, it was this, again, nothing that my like dad ever said. It was just this concept of like, that's too much compensation for the amount of work. Like, if you're going to make $700, like, you need to like break your back, right? Like, I need to spend 20 hours shooting and editing these videos for these people. And I just didn't grasp the concept of being able to charge, like I said, and they're talking about like, if you're only charging $30 to $50 an hour, you undervalue yourself. You need to get it up to at least like $75 an hour. And then as real professionals can charge $100 to $150 an hour for their editing services. And I was like, these guys are on acid. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, I knew I needed to get better. So I kept reading, and it was this whole battle I had between, I see that these guys are doing it, my mindset and my beliefs that I was raised with, whether, implicit or not, tell me this is a scam, and that, like, not even a scam. Like, so I was a little worried it was a scam, right? Because they're marketing a couple programs. They had some training programs, but then the thing I was really eyeing was this, like, monthly membership. And I'm like, okay, so part of me was telling me it's a scam, right? Like, I'm going to join this monthly membership, and they're going to take my money, and then, like, they're just making stuff up. But then I was like, okay, let's get past that just for the argument. I remember thinking, like, let's just assume that it is legit. And let's just assume that I could get to that, and I wouldn't even say the 100 to 150. I would say that like 50 to 75, where they were saying like 75 is the bare minimum, 50 you're undervaluing. I was like, okay, if I could even get to the 50 to 75, I remember thinking that I don't think that's ethical. Like, even if I could get to that $50 to $75 an hour, thinking like, that's not ethical for me to charge someone that much if they're willing to do it and to make that much money for the amount of work. It's just not right. And I remember thinking like, I want to get to $15 an hour, maybe up to $25 an hour, depending on the kind of work, if I'm doing more advanced work. But like, I remember thinking wanting to be around $15 an hour. And that mental battle of like, it's unethical. Even if I could get them to charge me this much, like, I would feel ashamed to tell my dad. I remember thinking like, there's no way I could tell my dad that I was making $50 an hour just to shoot and edit people's weddings. I'd be embarrassed and, like I said, ashamed. Like, it would be like if I told my dad I'm making money selling drugs. And that was the battle I was going through. And then I also remember thinking, like, joining this membership, thinking, I don't remember how much it was. It was like, I want to say like $20 a month. And the concept to like spend $20 a month for a member, maybe it was 15. I think it was 15 to spend that. That was such a big deal to me to think, like, you know, just for marketing stuff, like, it's not actually going to be like, and now I just see the value of stuff. Like, I mean, I spend thousands of dollars on, you know, every year on stuff, training stuff and programs, and, you know, a few $100s a month, sometimes more. But then even that 15 to join this thing, and I ended up doing it because I figured I would do it because there's different benefits, but one of them was a library of like ebooks and guides, and I'd gotten some of the free ones, but there was some other ones that they're advertising I wanted. So I was like, I know what I'll do. I will join and I'll download all the books and resources. Oh, the other thing is they had this invoicing software. This is before PayPal, or at least I knew about PayPal. This is like 2004, 2005. I'm not sure. I know PayPal's around, but I didn't know about it. And I remember thinking, I'll just download them all. So all these books is well worth the $15, and I'll cancel my membership. Kind of funny now. You start to see this mindset of how it was. I thought it was unethical to charge for a valuable service, but I was going to go rip these guys off and just do 1 month and steal all their content. I guess it wasn't really stealing. There was nothing saying, you know, you can't do that. And there was even their guarantee is that, you know, 60 day, I think, you know, money back offer. But anyways, you can see the mindset there. And I remember I joined, it was probably one of the best things I did. I joined, I downloaded a bunch of books. In fact, I forgot about all this. I just, about a month ago, found all these books I printed out about how to create a business plan, you know, marketing strategy, a lot of direct response. And I remember then making the decision, let me wrap this up. Okay. I remember making the decision to believe these guys. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I remember because I had all these, like, it was almost like I could hear my dad's voice. And I don't even know if my dad felt this way, but this is like, I had this like evil twin version of my dad in my head, like accusing me of all these ideas of being successful. And I remember thinking, I was hearing all that, but I decided to trust these other guys anyways. And I remember thinking, like, okay, my dad doesn't run a business. My dad tried running a business and it didn't work out for whatever reason. And he failed. Whether he quit or whatever, you know, like, he's not running a business anymore. These guys are. So I'm going to go ahead and just trust them. And I remember it was like going against every fiber of what I thought was right. But I remember starting to do direct response marketing. So I remember, like, I changed my pricing from $700 to I had like 3 packages. I raised my prices. I did the 3 packages so that way, because I remember reading them saying that you're giving them 3 chances to say yes and 1 chance to say no versus 1 chance to say yes and 1 chance to say no. And I remember I tried direct response. And so I remember I wrote out this sales letter. I wrote out a list of just every single person I know. And again, I'm like 18 years old, I think, at this point. And I'd never made more than, you know, I'd never made $1,000 a month in my entire life. Let's just put it that way. And there were many months where $300 or $400 was all I was making in a month. But I'd never made more than $1,000 in an entire month with all my jobs put together. Maybe, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. That's pretty accurate. So you can see, you know, where I was. And I remember just doing it anyways. I remember going down to Costco and, so first I made a list of literally every single person I knew. I didn't know about targeting or that kind of stuff. I just knew that they were saying that, you know, you send out your list, 10% of that list is going to be interested, and 10% of that are going to actually be buyers. So I literally wrote down a list of every single person I knew. And at the time I was engaged. So this whole thing, this mindset change, you know, happened over several months, if not a year. This was a long, slow process of me rewiring my own brain here with reading these materials. So, and taking baby steps. So I remember by the time I was like, I was actually going to invest the money and I guess the credibility to like actually send these out with my name on them. I was engaged at this point, and we were planning our wedding. So we'd already been like putting together a guest list. So I kind of piggybacked off of it, and I literally wrote down every single person I know, and some people I didn't know, because like I said, I had this wedding guest list. And I just figured, okay, so if my target market is someone getting married, everyone knows people getting married. So I'm going to write down every single person I know, because again, at the time I knew nothing about targeting. I wasn't going to go buy a list. I knew about lists, but I wasn't going to go buy a list because those were expensive. At the time, they were a fortune. It might as well have been $100,000, because I think they talked about them being like $500 and up. There wasn't Facebook. There was MySpace, but there wasn't like, I could go and just target Facebook ads. So I just literally wrote down every single person I knew, plus some, borrowed some off of I basically went through, I wrote down everyone I knew, then I took the wedding invite list, crossed off a couple people that it would have been like too inappropriate to send to, added that list minus a few people to my list. And then I sent out, I wrote all these out. And again, I've been already doing invitations, so I kind of was already in that mindset. Wrote out this sales letter, went down to Costco so hard. I remember like I bought 100 stamps. And at the time, it cost me, for 100 stamps, it was $36. I can't tell you how hard that was to spend $36 on some just stamps. Right? Like, that was crazy. It wasn't like I was buying tapes for my camera or equipment, like not even knowing if it was going to work or not. It was insane. So I bought them. I sent out all these letters, and then that was like a huge pivotal moment for me to really grow and change. And I won't go into all the details, but just to go over that whole concept. And now I know this was long and drawn out, but I know I say this in almost every podcast. I know this is for someone to hear. And listening to like the kind of painful story, I'm sure some of you are thinking like, oh my gosh, would this guy just move on? I'm sure that hearing that and hearing about how like my perception of what my family would think, particularly my dad, and all this kind of stuff, and how all this negativity and not feeling worthy and valuable, and that kind of ties back into number 2 even, to even charge more than a few bucks an hour, and how I had to overcome that. So these are all just like mental barriers. And I think back now, I'm like, man, now that I'm doing it and now that I'm successful and I'm doing a lot of this online marketing stuff, and I'm like, I had the keys, I'm going to use the phrase, the keys to the kingdom in 2005. I had the material. I could have, if I had ran with this even more, and I ended up, this is funny, I actually followed the family pattern. I did this for a while. I did get more successful. I started doing more and more weddings off of this stuff. I got out of those initial marketing efforts, I got one person, that's pretty accurate with, I sent 100 and something, and I ended up getting one. So that's about 1%. One relative who ended up referring me like 4 or 5 weddings. No, maybe it was like 3 or 4 weddings. So obviously, huge return on investment. I mean, because I didn't spend more than $50. I mean, $36 for the stamps. I already had the paper, and I used, obviously it was some ink, a decent amount of ink. So $40 to $50. I ended up getting at least 2 weddings, if not 3 weddings, off of this one relative. And she was just referring people to me like crazy. I was getting calls from her, and she's like, hey, so-and-so, I'm going to tell them to call you, or here's their number, call them. I got, so it was obviously an amazing return on investment. So then I ended up following in my family footsteps, where I ended up then getting a safe job. That's what I mentioned. I worked for the county doing video stuff, and I took it. And guess what? Guess how much I was making an hour? $12, which is like what I felt I was worth. So I took it. It had insurance. I had a union, which really just did nothing but take a bunch of money on my paycheck. But, all of those things. And then it took me a few years to start over. It wasn't then. So it was at this point, I started my business in 2004. I quit it to start this quote unquote safe responsible job in 2006. And I didn't even do my business on the side. I was getting calls. My business was picking up. And I was just straight up, I was either telling people no outright, I don't do that anymore. Or I had people who were persistent. So I would price them out. I would charge something that was like so high that there's no way they were going to say yes. And if they did say yes, it was actually worth my time to go do it. So I killed that business off. And then in 2008, I got laid off because of the economy and budget cuts. Our school was taking a $2 million budget hit. And so my entire wing where I worked, our entire area, there were 16 of us that got laid off. We were all considered support staff. So then I had to start. It wasn't till 2009, late 2009, early 2010. Well, I guess 2010 really is when I got back into the whole entrepreneur thing again and going back to my dreams and wanting to do. And so I spent a few years being an entrepreneur doing that. And I remember I found these books, right? These ebooks, Claude Hopkins, Scientific Advertising, and then a couple of like the Yankee Silver ones. Some of these books. I apologize if I'm getting his last name wrong. Silva, I don't remember. I was reading through them, and I got really emotional. Like, I didn't quite break down crying, but I got pretty emotional thinking, like, back to what I said, having like the keys to the kingdom back in 2005. Like, man, if I had ran with this, granted, okay, fine, I took the job in 2006, whatever. But if I had stopped, if I didn't spend so much time doubting and questioning, if I had jumped into this stuff late 2004 or, and then through on 2005 and continued doing this. And then when I got that job in 2006, then I could have been more picky because then I could have been riskier, right? Because then I could have said, I'm already making enough to live off of through my job. So now I can afford to build my business how I want it to be versus I have to take these projects. And kept learning the internet marketing and direct response marketing. And as the internet marketing got bigger, gotten in it, man, I could be a millionaire. Who knows? Like, who knows where I'd be right now? Instead of being just a year and a half into this journey and just now launching my podcast and my YouTube channel and all this kind of stuff, I think back. And so I'm not going to lie. I was like, for 3 or 4 days, I was like almost depressed. I was moping around. Like I just kept telling my wife, like, man, like where would I have been? Like how different could my life have been? And I had to snap out of it and go, you know what? All I can do is learn from it. All I can do is take that lesson moving forward and not to do it again, not to quit again, to keep going, keep learning, keep striving. But like I said, it really bothered me. And I feel like this is therapeutic to get this off my chest because I was borderline depressed for a few days, and then I got over it, but I feel even better now. I got to tell the story, and hopefully that helps you not to make the same mistake. So just really quick, to recap, the whole idea of mental barriers, you got to break through them. I listed 3. You're not ready, you're not good enough, and, you're not really, the being successful is not for regular people, right? Like that whole concept of it's too easy. It's not right. You shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. Like you're not a celebrity. Don't try to be, that whole concept. And then, I talked about a couple of pointers. One is if you're really struggling that much, get your attention off of yourself. Think about your responsibilities around you. I gave some examples of, Superman, still rushing in to defeat the enemy, even though he's got his weakness. Talk about Batman going up against someone more powerful because he's got a responsibility to others to put that focus on those around you can help. And then I also talked about, like not letting the past hold you back. Could your business be a lot further? Do you feel like, like you've wasted time and you've let fear hold you back? Okay, don't let that stop you from going forward. Learn from it. Just like I had to. I was really tempted to just I was immobilized for a few days. I had to just say, I'm going to learn from it. And then that drives me as I'm doing this podcast, that drives me even more. Like I'm determined to not let that defeat end just in that defeat, to then use that. Like, so hopefully you're listening to this and it's going to help you to go forward. Maybe you've quit and maybe you took that safe job, and maybe this will, motivate you to keep doing your business idea on the side, to keep working at it. Maybe you're thinking of quitting because it's hard or whatever, but using that and that drives me now. So the same thing is like, how can you let your past failures learn from them and let them drive you to future success instead of letting them pull you down. So with that, I actually went a little bit longer than I was expecting. I figured this would be under 30 minutes, and we're at 45, it looks like, just about. So I feel like I could go on with this all day. I feel like I'm going to probably have more episodes about this and bringing guests. But that about ends our time today. Thank you so much for listening. I know this is helping someone out there, but here's the thing. There's people out there who aren't hearing this who need to. And they need to hear this message and other messages I've talked about, messages I will talk about in the future, and they're not getting it because they don't know about the Business Hero podcast. So do me a favor, go to iTunes, give us a rating and a review, and that's going to help get the word out there, right? So the more ratings and reviews I get, it's going to bump us up in search results, help us get featured, more people can see it, and get the word out to more business owners and entrepreneurs to help them. As a thank you, what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to starting, let me be a little redundant here, every episode off with a shout out to 2 or 3 people who left a rating and review, and I'm going to give you a shout out and I'm going to thank you. Simple as that. I appreciate that you're helping me out, and I appreciate that you're helping other people find the Business Hero podcast, and you're helping build the Business Hero podcast nation. So I'll give you a shout out and thank you live in the beginning of the show. So go ahead and do that, rating and review. And if you have any questions or comments, anything you'd like to send in, go ahead and send them to, I'll just give you my personal email, Jared, Jared, N, the letter N, like Nate, because that's my middle name, Nathaniel, Elrod, ELROD, @gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Of course, you can also go to bizdevheroes.com. That's BIZDEV heroes.com, and check out the blog. You can contact me there, leave a comment. This is going to be a post. You can leave a comment, start a conversation there. I appreciate it. Share it with your social network. I appreciate it. But if you're thinking you can only do one thing, go leave the review and the ratings to help get the word out. All right, until next time, guys. Be awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Business Heroes podcast. If you enjoyed the show today, please head over to iTunes and give us a rating and a review. It really helps to help get the word out there. And of course, feel free to share this with any of your friends on any of your preferred social networks. And if you're looking for more information about the Business Heroes podcast, where you can find more episodes and kind of more about what we do, check out bizdevheroes.com. That's BIZDEV heroes.com. Once again, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.